Hello, welcome back to the ministry, you guys. And today, the Lord has me talking about something that personally I would prefer not to, because I'm kind of over talking about these counterfeit relationships, opportunities, and scenarios. But the Lord done brought me back here. And He brought me back here because He kind of been talking about it subtly to me for 2 weeks. Okay. And I didn't want to talk about it. But it's funny. Depending on what it is that you are in prayer about, the Lord will kind of bring you around to what He desires for you to talk about it, regardless of whether you really want to talk about it or not. And I'm like, okay. So this is what the Lord did to me. Yesterday, I randomly was just preparing to eat dinner, and my dad had a TV show on, and it was a game show. It's one of the game shows he watch all the time. And one of the contestants' name was Willow. I was like, well, that's unusual. So I ignored it and let it go. Later that night, I turned the TV off, and this is what happens. God does this to me all the time. Turned the TV off, was doing something completely different, was in my chill mode, trying not to think about nothing. And randomly, around about 9 o'clock, I got the unction to turn on my show, the show that I used to watch when I was a kid. And lo and behold, one of the main characters, which is like the sidekick character, named what? Willow, was dealing with the fact that her boyfriend left her. He didn't just leave her, but he left town. And she was upset. So because she was upset, follow me, which is spiritual ears. She was upset. She decided in her emotional distress that she was going to do a spell. Follow me. And the spell that she was going to do was that her will be done. And I'm like, so is this what you wanted to bring my attention to, Lord? And then the Lord started to talk to me. And I'm about to tell you what the Lord said. So this goes out to all the counterfeits, okay? Because if you're coming to watch me, let me therapize you for a minute, because I'm about to give you some therapy, okay? And you're not going to like it. It's going to hit your little nerve that you don't like so much. All right? But I'm going to need you to breathe, because God wanted me to come for you today. It's not that I wanted to. It's not that it was my decision. But I need to talk to your humanity, okay? Let me start off by saying something I always say. When it comes to a counterfeit, I have always been the one to go to the Lord, and the first thing I pray whenever the Lord brings my attention to a counterfeit is this. Lord, I pray that they denounce, come out of alignment, and come out of agreement with anything that they have done and uproot it, repent for what they did, relent, meaning stop doing what they were doing, and leave me and mine alone. Okay? That's my number one prayer. But this comes to show me that if there is any type of counterfeit, maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's for somebody else. Maybe the counterfeit is just being a lurker and a monitor. But if that's the case, the Lord got this word for you. All right? So what does He have to say? So when it comes down to it, the fact of the matter is You would be so much better if you would relinquish your desire to have control in this situation, okay? Let me let you know something automatically. God is the one that is in control. 110%. Even when it looks like he doesn't know what he's doing, or it looks like he's not in control and false evidence look really, really real, God's still in control. So it's like what I was saying in a previous word. It talks about when the man was sent on the road to Damascus, and when the Lord confronted this man on the road to Damascus, when Psycho Saul became Paul, God confronted and said, "Why are you hurting my servant?" And he pricked him. A prick is a tool or little thing that the farmer will use to turn its animal back in the direction that it's supposed to go. For us human beings, a prick usually is that internal instinct knower that says, I feel like I need to let this thing go. I feel like I need to do this. I feel it in my gut, down deep in the deep downs of my deep down, that I need to let this thing go. And it starts out as a light, I need to let this thing go. Then it becomes a more serious unction and urge, like a beacon, like a danger, Will Robinson. There is an issue here. Let me let this thing go, until it comes to a point where it's literally internally screaming at you and externally your environment starts to match it. Right? I hope this is making sense. So, if there is a person, woman, man, situation, circumstance, or opportunity that simply refuses to release what God is desiring to take in its right, appropriate direction. For example, the man or said woman. I'm going to talk about later the movie Perfect Match. If you did not see the Perfect Match review, go back and look at the Perfect Match review. It's an 8-part review on the movie The Perfect Match. Now, the fact of the matter is, for any counterfeit, if you put just as much effort into actually seeking God for the man that belongs to you, or vice versa, woman, it really would make an actual difference, because you would be chasing what God wanted for you. But that would seem too much like right for you, because of the fact that would mean you would have to change. Because when God brings somebody into your life, he must elevate you to become, hear me with your spiritual ears, what's necessary to be a benefit to that person, place, or scenario. Are you following me? Which means that you would have to do your own work to release belief system, thoughts, ideologies, desires to do witchcraft, all kinds of stuff that is not for you. And deal with your childhood trauma that makes you feel like this is a necessity. You would have to deal with the fact that you would have to, just like that character who was making the decision that she was going to do a spell to make her will be done, She was governing her own sovereign will over another human being. And let us take this moment to address the fact, as I said in the previous word, that the Greek definition of conform is to govern your own sovereign will over another human being. And in Greek, it looks like what? Schizophrenia. You actually have false evidence that appears real that is preventing you from relinquishing control, which in some cases, it's the fact that you don't feel protected and you didn't feel protected as a child, and you had to do it all by yourself, but could only trust men for sexual gratification or what they could materialistically do for you. Am I hitting a point? Am I hitting anything? But in order to get with the man of God that God has for you, and you know something, ironically, the man of God that God has for you, the man that you're trying to hold on to, which is the kingdom spouse of somebody else that you're trying to put your will upon and your desire because you want them back. There's a man that's almost an identical replica to him that is ordained sovereignly to be with you, but you're too busy chasing someone that isn't. And they've come into alignment and agreement with letting go of all their childhood trauma, their ideologies, their issues, their problems, and so on and so forth. And because they've made that decision, they had to separate from you because they came to the realization that they were walking outside of God's will and they needed to go under the covering of God or they were going to miss it. And now God's touching you and saying, hey, you want to miss it too? I need you to get right. So you would end up having to put off your old self. I'm being reminded of a scene from the movie Beyond the Lights. There's a moment in that film where the woman who was the entertainer, she had on the wig, she had on the hair, she had on the outfit, she had on everything. There's a moment in the movie where she cuts the string for the sew-in and pulls the hair off. You will have to come out from underneath all that vanity, all that makeup, all that pretense that makes you feel like you have the right to manipulate or use or hurt or do whatever because you're in character, right? Because the vanity of this external viewpoint of self, you can become something that you aren't. But when you take the makeup off and have to sit with yourself in the middle of the night and actually stare into a mirror or sit in the dark with yourself, you realize you are not happy, and probably in some cases you may not be healthy. I'm gonna let that stew there because I wasn't gonna say that, but guess what? That's probably what the Lord wanted. You are operating in a Jezebelic spirit with your hair, your nails, your wigs, your this, your that. But at the end of the day, there is no desire, no want, and deep down inside, you're dead. You feel dead inside. And because you feel dead inside, it's almost like you want others to feel as dead as you do. And you know who does that? Satan. He knows that his end is the fiery lake and he has no power. So he's going to take as many people down with him as possible. But it doesn't have to be that way for you. You do know that, right? The relationships that you had with whoever that person was, whoever the person is that belonged to someone else, whoever kingdom spouse that is, you had a relationship that was infatuation. I need you to hear me with your spiritual ears. I'm about to tell you something. 10 to 12 years ago, I was in the same thing. So I know what I'm talking about. 12 years ago, I wasn't walking with God. I was in the same shoes as you, so I understand what it feels like to have been there. You get in a relationship with somebody, and the only real reason that you really back with them or with them is because, let's just be honest, can we have an adult conversation? The sex was good. And even if what wasn't all that good, it was good enough that you kept them around, right? Because it was something else that they had that you liked. They made you feel, maybe they made you feel comfortable. They made you feel open. They made you finally feel you could open up to a degree. And it was like this person unconsciously was giving you therapy that you felt that you needed. You know something about therapists? This happens to a lot of therapists. People will have a person that is giving them therapy, and if it's a woman, a male client will become infatuated with them. Vice versa for men. They feel like because they're helping them, that they need to be attached to this person. So they cling on to them. Some of these people end up having stalkers because of this. But the person, only real reason for being there was to help them emotionally transition and transform themselves to be able to be ready for the next situation and circumstance. Okay? It was two people passing each other. But in the midst of you passing, you held on to each other for a season. But when your season was up, he knew to walk away. You did not. So you're still chasing behind him. And the Lord's trying to tell you, the season's up. Let him go. Let him go. So you end up emotionally needing that help. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't that the man didn't want you. I'm sure he did. And in that season, he was in love. This man was in love. And in that season, he made you feel that you could finally find love again. And the fact that maybe somebody could love you without hurt. But there was an unhealed wound within you that actually despised that. Coming back to the film A Perfect Match, what the Lord showed me last night as I was writing the note up for this was that, one, a perfect match if you're playing chess, there's such a thing as a checkmate, where in some cases that you get down to the end of the board, the only two objects on the board where no moves can be made are the two kings. These two pieces checkmate each other because they can't do nothing else. They're identical opposites to one another. Literally, the two pieces are identical opposites. One's a white king, one is a black king. But a checkmate is actually when a piece is positioned that no other moves by its opposing piece can be made. This person put you in a corner and loved you to a degree that you felt safe and secure, but no other moves could be made. You ended up at an impasse and you were unable to move. So you didn't want him to go anywhere, and you didn't want to go anywhere either. So you wanted to stay in a consistent toxic cycle where you stayed, because there's a point in a game that when it's the last two pieces, you can move all you want, but you're never going to win the game. The game is up. It's done. There's no more pieces on the board. It's finished. So when this man, or if you want to flip it, it's in the case of a woman. So when this man approached you for a relationship, you actually may have had your guards up. I remember years ago, I was in high school and I wanted to not end up in a relationship. I didn't want a relationship. I was against relationships. And this particular person came and approached me. Started to tell me I was beautiful. Started to tell me all of this. Started to tell me all of this. And I was like, wow, this guy must really be into me, because at the time I would wear my hair in a ponytail and jeans all the time with a sweatshirt in my chill mode. So when this guy starts to come forward to you and you got all of this stuff, maybe you got the hair, the nails, the this, the that, you got the body, you got all of this, but it's superficial, sweetheart, and you know it's superficial because you got to take it off at the end of the day. And he was attracted to your external beauty. And you kind of came into an agreement. At least you both thought you did. But see, there's this funny thing about emotions. Eventually, they become attached even when they don't want to. When you're like, anytime two people spend too much time together, especially of the opposite sex, and you are having sex, you're going to catch feelings at some point. It's inevitable. Especially when you start doing things relational people do. Meaning if you're in a relationship, you're going to catch feelings. When you start talking, when you start experiencing each other's experiences, and you start talking, but that's what happened, right? It was never meant to get that serious. The closeness, the intimacy. But you, as the female, would be the imitation of the original God-ordained spouse. And for him, as the male, he's the imitation of your God-ordained spouse. You're close enough to one another that you don't have to change anything about yourselves. And you can operate in your sin, which is actually iniquity, is sin that you like. And you was loving it. It was alluring to both of you. It seemed perfect. You were each other's perfect distraction. He gave you advice when you needed it, and you gave him advice when he needed it. You never allowed a man in your life to get as close as this particular person. And you didn't realize that they were burrowing a hole in your heart emotionally because you had started to let them in. And then you started to introduce each other to friends and family, which actually solidified what you were creating, or at least you hoped it did. You hoped it did. But you knew that there was something wrong. It was infatuation, but you were trying to call it love. You were trying to make it bigger than the moment that it was in. And then you found out. God has a way of opening up a person to a degree. God, I feel like I'm being harsh. I say what you want me to say. But you found out that God had a plan. And his plan had nothing to do with you. There's a moment in the movie A Perfect Match when the guy comes into the bridal suite only to find out that as he's preparing his best man outfit for his friend's wedding, he turns to see the bride that's in the mirror adjacent to the room and finds out that she is the one that he'd been sleeping with, and she marrying somebody else. I don't know in what way. Maybe the Lord showed you, maybe the Lord allowed it. But you figured it out, that God was going to separate this relationship. Maybe they even told you. I'm reminded again of the scene in the film that my dad was watching a couple of mornings back where I think it was Wyatt Earp or something like that. And Kevin Costner played Wyatt Earp. And the woman who wanted him, she wanted this man so bad that she was saying, oh, you're going to make a decision and you're going to change your mind and you're going to this and you're going to that because you're going to be with me. And he said, no, I'm not. I know which way I'm going. I know which way I'm heading. And that's the direction that I'm headed in. And because that's the direction that I'm headed in, that's the direction I got to go. And she's like, oh, well, don't worry about it because you're going to change your mind eventually. But then he doesn't. There comes a point in that scene. There's a scene in the movie. I wasn't even watching the screen at the time, but the woman that he's actually trying to be with and this woman end up in the same room together. And they end up in a cat fight of some sort. Because, see, counterfeit comes to a realization she can never be the original. She can never be the real thing. You can look like, dress like, appear like, do whatever you want like the thing. But the fact of the matter is, the real thing, often imitated, never duplicated. You could not duplicate nor be what that person wanted. And they were eventually going to go for what God needed of them. The problem was you made a decision that you wanted your will to be done. And you ended up in a level of depression because you have tormenting spirits that are operating within you that refuse to let go. Because you don't have the understanding that if you let go, release, and allow God to heal you, those tormenting spirits will be forced to release you. And you can walk into the relationship that you're called to walk into. There is a season where separation needs to occur. And when that separation comes, you may want to hold on by any means necessary. But when the time comes for a release, the release is going to happen. And you're more afraid of this man having released you than actually facing yourself and admitting that you got work to do. She has work to do. You have work to do if you're going to be with the man that God has called you to be with. And if you really came into the understanding, this man is going to be so much better than the one you're just trying to hold on to. Because in wholeness of the picture, this man's going to be able to take care of you to a degree that this man was not willing. He would have forced himself to stand in that position because of loyalty and obligation, which you probably tried to make as many loyalty obligations, threats, and all kinds of stuff to make sure that they were stable. Why would you want to threaten somebody to keep them in your life? Why would you want to consistently have to continue to do witchcraft to make sure that they stayed in your life? When you could let the person go and start to deal with yourself, repent, come to the Lord Jesus Christ, and actually have a moment of come to Jesus moment and an epiphany that if you let them go and you go in the direction God needs for you to go, there's a man that is waiting that's 10 times better than the one you're trying to hold on to. Because that person's already accounted for. And you actually are too, but you got to be willing to go in that direction. You have to be willing. You see that there is a wilderness, but you don't want to go into the dark place. But just like the animal with the prick, and I'm going to come back for the next part.